Friday, time for a weekend wrap-up. However, wrap-up's a little light this week, as last week. Still waiting for parts, still waiting for the compressor to get fixed. Did a little bit of work on the Firebird. Sold the Camaro. This Camaro is going to go to a gentleman in New Hampshire, so that's going to disappear. This week we spent a lot of time running back and forth to Tampa, about an hour and a half away from here. My wife's been in the hospital, so tied up a little bit. Worked on the Firebird most of the week, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We've been getting a lot of questions about different subjects, and thought I'd take this time to maybe answer a few of them. So what do you got?
Well, Willie from Texas, he wants to know, what is the stuff you use on the bottom of the cars?
All right, that would be Raptor Liner. Raptor Liner is a spray and bed liner. There's a lot of different brands of it out there. We use Raptor Liner just because it's readily available, works really well. Comes in black, or it comes in a tintable, where you can put like 10% of color, the car color in it, to tint it, whether you're doing the inside or the bottom or whatever you want. But Raptor Liner, but it is a bed liner product. What else?
Terry from Florida, what happened to Brian's Camaro?
Oh, Terry from Florida. This must be a friend of Brian's. Well, Brian's Camaro got put in storage for a little while because we were waiting for parts. And then unfortunately, while we were waiting for parts, other stuff came in and it just kind of got pushed aside a little bit. Now we are going to get Brian's back going again. Fortunately, Brian has been very diligent about getting parts. We got the motor in, transmission in, we got a whole bunch of parts. So that car is going to be coming in here very shortly, and we will make some big progress on that pretty quickly. Actually, these two cars are probably going to be leaving here very shortly, which will make some space, and we'll get them inside here. What else you got?
Jerry from Alabama, how long does it take to sand and buff the average car?
Oh, Jerry, that's a good one. Wet sanding and buffing takes a lot of time, especially when you start getting into some door jams and things like that, some tight areas.
That's an understatement.
But typically we can wet sand and buff a car in about 40 hours. That's doing a pretty good job. Takes a lot of work, but typically when you wet sand and buff a car, we'll do it a rough buff on it when it first comes out of the booth, maybe a week or so. We'll do a rough buff, we'll knock it down and open up the pores on it and kind of allow it to breathe a little bit. And that'll go a couple of days, and then we'll hit it with a buffer. And then the job will be completed as far as all the assembly work and so on, and then it'll get another buff in the end. Because as the clear dries, sometimes it shrinks up, sometimes it swells, sometimes it has a memory and it goes back to whatever peel was in it. So once it's good and hard, that goes away. You can wet sand it one final time and give it a last good buff. So it does very time consuming. What else we got?
John from Tampa, Florida wants to know how long to install a complete wiring harness.
Okay, complete wiring harness, if we're talking about basically a body harness, which would consist of anything in the dashboard, all the lights, fuel senders, gauges, that type of thing. Typically takes about 40 hours, but we do things a little bit different. We solder everything, heat shrink it, take a lot of time in a wiring harness protecting any kind of wiring that's going in and out. If it's a finished car, typically it takes a little bit longer, but typically about 40 hours is a good routine to figure out.
Tommy from Ohio, what's your favorite tool in the shop?
Oh, Tommy, that is a loaded question. A good one though, but loaded. It depends on what I'm doing. Fabrication, I love the plasma cutter and a welder. Doing body work, Mud Hog is, my best friend. So it's kind of a loaded question. It really depends on what's going on in the shop. But I would say overall, probably the welder is my favorite tool. It's pretty versatile, doing a lot of things.
Walter from New York, what's your favorite color to paint?
Well, Walter, I'm going to say black. and I'll tell you why. Black is typically the most difficult color in everybody's eyes because the body has to be flawless. And as a paint and body man, that allows us to show off our skills as far as how straight the car is, has the best reflection and the most depth of any color. And back in the day, we were doing a lot of magazine cars. That's the color that everybody wanted to do. The photography, you know, is much better on a black car than any other color. So I'd have to say black. I do like black as far as my personal taste, but I like a lot of colors. But the black seems to be probably the top of the list.
And being that I'm the guy that does a majority of the buffing here, I love buffing black cars because they look the best.
There you go.
Matt from Washington State. Do you accept jobs from customers from other states?
Absolutely. I would say the majority of our work comes from other states. Firebird behind us is from New York. This car is actually going to New Hampshire. So yeah, we do quite a bit of work from out of state. Typically the labor rate here in Florida is considerably cheaper than other states. So it kind of warrants the ability to ship a car here. Even with that, it's still cheaper to have one done here in Florida. So yeah, we do a lot of work from other states.
Ray from Las Vegas. Sandblast or acid dip? You might catch some static on this one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't like sand. The blaster that we use uses a product called Black Beauty, which is like a really fine ground up coal. And the reason I choose that method over sand is because the coal does not hold moisture. And if the sand gets trapped in a rocker or a tube, it'll hold moisture and it'll tend to rot out, where the coal doesn't do that. Now on the other side of that is the acid does a great job, but it is very labor intensive. When you acid dip a car, it leaves the metal nice and smooth and clean, and you still have to kind of sand any of the Bondo and stuff that's on the car off, because it typically doesn't usually take that completely off. And before you can seal it, you have to sand that metal substrate in order to get the epoxy sealer to stick. So typically speaking, the acid dipping takes considerably longer on our end of it. The other downfall to it is it gets into areas on the car, like in firewall, that you can't get back to, that like where there's a seam sealer and a pinch weld, it'll eat that out of there, and your car will get this inherent squeak in it that you can't do anything about. So acid dipping has its place, but on an entire car, it's a little tough. So I would say coal blasting, not necessarily sandblasting, but very similar.
All right, I got one for you, and it's the last one we got. What's your favorite thing to do on cars?
My favorite thing to do on cars? Well, I am a custom nut. I love anything custom. Chopping them, channeling them, shortening them, sectioning them, dubbing them, widening them, whatever it happens to be that alters the car. You know, different suspension. I have been doing this for 40 years. And in 40 years, I have done a tremendous amount of stock vehicles. And as much as I love them, I love doing something different. I love being creative. So I would say anything custom is probably my favorite. But that's a loaded question because I love cars so much. About being favorite really doesn't matter. Whether it's a stock restored or a custom street rod, muscle car, truck, it doesn't matter. I love them all. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys have any questions, throw them in there and we'll do a little sit down like this maybe one day during each week. So I mean, this is just kind of a good way for you to get answers to stuff, and helped us out this week because pork was a little slim. But you guys have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Have a good weekend.